Thanks for the intro, John. But I think there has been some false advertising because I'm not really a brilliant mind, to be honest. Also, I just realized that the talk is about robot dogs, and I actually don't even have robot dogs in the slides. So I actually kind of catfished you all. So yeah, let's get into it. So I wanted to ask you a few questions to start this off. So the first one, have you ever felt like you should cut down on your screen time? If we can get a show of hands. Number two, have people annoyed you by criticizing the amount of time you spend online? 3, have you ever felt bad or guilty about being online too much? 4, do you reach for your phone as soon as you wake up? Have you ever felt anxious or had nerves if you couldn't find it? Right, if we go to the next slide, you probably have an addiction issue. So these are actually the questions used by Cage for Alcoholics Anonymous. And the author of this book, The Lonely Century, really highlights this point, that we probably do have an unhealthy relationship with how we use technology, but we just don't really acknowledge it. Who's seen this documentary, The Social Dilemma?
Yeah.
It was an interesting one, right? So when was the last time any of you spent a day without your phone? Can anyone remember? Isn't that like a little bit weird? And this question I ask a lot as well is, for me, 2005 was a great year. I was 12 during 2000, but I remember it, for some reason, I think 2005 was good for me, even though I was 12, like what did I really do? But before social media in 2005, do you think life was better back then, or do you think it's better now? Let's get a show of hands of like, if you err on the side of it being better before social media. Okay, it's pretty mixed. Because, in 2005, the reason I included this was I had a chat about this with one of my mates. And in 2005, Kanye released Diamonds from Sierra Leone. Now he says some very different things. So that was sort of my test to see, have things got better or worse? So when we discuss AI, right, everyone always thinks of this, robots, Terminator, like very physical things. But what it really is just software. It's just software that automates predictions. So whether it's Google Maps on your phone, Amazon Marketplace, Airbnb, targeted advertisements, all this stuff we use every day is just AI. It's just software that just automates predictions. Here's another example of what's called computer vision. So this is actually what AI is for the most part. You have an algorithm identifying cars, identifying people, whether they're moving, gender. This is how we largely use AI. It's just predicting things. Sometimes the predictions can be a little bit weird. So this was an algorithm that was used to predict dogs. Or when they took it outside of the testing environment to the real world, it just started seeing dogs everywhere, which is one of the ethical issues with AI. Sometimes it hallucinates. The predictions can be a little bit strange. But the way AI works is through something called classification. So classification is how we make sense of the world. We label and categorize things to predict their behavior. So if you look at this graph, right? So vertebrates, you have with backbone, you got mammals, you have fish, you got invertebrates. We like, as human beings, to put things in their boxes, categorize them so we can predict their behavior. And we got machines to automate this process for us through machine learning. So this machine learning model predicts that the animals are a cat and a dog, and it classifies them by adding labels. This is a more advanced computer vision algorithm. So it's detecting, is this a giraffe or is this an elephant? Is it a zebra? And it's just making predictions. And then we got this one. So we're using machines here, using AI to predict bad apples or damaged apples. But there's a real ethical dilemma with predicting bad apples. Because on the next slide, sometimes those bad apples are people. So around the world, using algorithms to determine whether someone's likely to commit a crime or reoffend, whether someone could be a refugee or a terrorist, really personal human rights decisions that are being automated by machines. And often they are discriminatory. If you look at the last one, algorithms in the criminal justice system, ProPublica did some really good research on this, and they found that a lot of algorithms used disproportionately, for example, deny black men parole, because what they do is they're not actually predicting whether someone will commit a crime. They're predicting based on postcode, because they're just machines at the end of the day. They just predict. So if they know that someone's from a lower economic background and they're more likely to commit lower crime, they don't know about the historical inequalities of that society or why that's the case, or how there's over policing in certain communities. It's just a machine. You feed it data, it'll just spit out outputs. And some of these outputs can be really problematic. So I mean, even with social media, right? We've had Cambridge Analytica, where Facebook was carrying out behavioral experiments on users. You've had things like Uber, who again were sued for firing drivers with an algorithm. You had Amazon, the very famous case of hiring bias with Amazon, where they had an AI algorithm for HR uses to predict who should be hired, and it started predicting that white men should really get the roles. And a lot of these issues are what's called just unintended consequences. No one really went out there to say, I'm going to be evil and do the wrong thing or do something bad. They just didn't think about the ethics from start to finish. And then these things happen. So even if you look at this one with Microsoft, they had a chatbot called Tay on Twitter. And Tay quickly became a Holocaust denier because people were spoofing it, telling it really horrific things, and it was just learning from this data and repurposing it and spitting out these biased outputs, and they had to shut it down, which shows that there are real severe unintended consequences unless you think about ethics at the start before you actually do something. So we mentioned like earlier example of autonomous vehicles. I previously just mentioned the issues about predictive policing. So in the future, we're going to have to answer this dilemma. Let's say you have an autonomous vehicle police car riding down the street, and it sees someone and it detects using emotional sensing AI that they might have aggressive behavior or they might have a weapon on them. Should that self-driving police car be able to make an arrest? And it's a really difficult question. If you're going to show hands of who ears on the side, gut feeling says no. And there's no right or wrong answer to this, by the way. As you can imagine, these are really tricky grey areas and no one's really figured out yet. So when you look at how do you actually answer these things these days, it's easy just to ask ChatGPT to do it for you. You don't actually have to think that hard anymore. So I asked this to ChatGPT, and this is what it said. So I said, what are the ethical issues of predictive policing? We went through bias and discrimination, privacy, lack of accountability, due process violations, reinforcing existing inequalities. It says it shouldn't be able to make an arrest. And it says that human judgment is needed to make these decisions. And I tried grilling it, right? Saying, what if there's no time for a human to assess? And it still gave me actually pretty good outputs about accountability, transparency, and fairness. And with ChatGPT, this is why I think it has captured everyone's imagination, because it's capable of producing some really amazing things. So we had passed an MBA exam, and the issues of plagiarism in schools because of just how powerful this technology is. There are still ethical issues with things like ChatGPT. So this was one of confirmation bias, where someone taught it that his wife is always right. So 2 + 5 actually equals 8. And later on, I don't include it in this, he starts arguing with it even more. And you can kind of bully it in a ways, right? And this one, we have real problematic issues with bias. So for example, this one on the left, it suggested for who should be hired, again, that white males would be the most suitable candidates. And this is a question I get a lot, right? What is the difference between Google and ChatGPT? Like philosophically, what is the distinction here? So with Google, let's say I'm going to make a cake. It gives me the ingredients. So if I need to research something or do a business report on something, it gives me loads of sources and resources. And I can kind of pick and choose what ingredients to put in my cake. But I have to actually put some effort into baking my own cake. The beauty of ChatGPT is that it just gives you the cake. It's just automated, it's just given for you, and it looks great, right? These 3 powders look the same. The cake looks delicious on the outside, but you don't actually know what was in the cake, what sources of information actually pulled from the internet to give you that output. Sometimes ChatGPT mixes up the sugar and salt. Sometimes it mixes up the sugar with cocaine, and you still kind of want to eat it. And there's a reason I'm bringing up cocaine, because if you go to the next slide, it did actually give someone life advice to say you should smuggle drugs sometimes it produces some really, really strange things. But this isn't actually a new problem. With bias and AI and search engines and the internet, this has been around for a while. It's just shedding a light on what's already been happening. So often we say with things like ChatGPT, you should fact check, you should think for yourself. But let's be honest, no one really thinks for themselves these days. We all use Google or search engines, and there's already bias within these. So for example, if you type in beautiful on Google and go in images, you get pictures of beautiful white women. So the question is, why are they always white? Why are they women? Why are they even people? Why is it not beautiful hills, trees, mountains? Because this is our bias, our mirror looking back at us. And for a while, the front page of search engines was just outright misogyny. It used to be women need to be put in their place, be controlled, be disciplined. And there's a great book called Algorithms of Oppression that talks about how much bias there is, but it's so pervasive that you don't even notice it, unlike other forms of bias, which are very human. Search engines and just technology is all around you, but we just don't really acknowledge it as much as we should. And this has some unintended consequences. So with search engines and online content, we often end up with feedback loops where we feed algorithms our biases. They reflect them back to us because they know what we want to click on. We click the link again, and this reinforces the bias. And during COVID, I think we can all agree things even online got a little bit weird, right? You got loads of conspiracy theories. It got harder to tell, like, who do I actually trust anymore? And you found that algorithms outwardly promoted conspiracy theories because it was good content. They got trending. Loads of people liked to click on them. It was eye-catching. Then we had the issue of echo chambers. And I myself am guilty of this. I think we all are. That you often like to be in online communities or spaces where people kind of agree with you, where you naturally gravitate to either politically, ideologically, religiously, and it's more comfortable to be around people that sort of reflect your views. But the issue with echo chambers is that the most extreme radical ideas can be absolutely normalized. So for example, if you look at fringe white nationalists stuck in their own online chat servers and everything, where for them in this space, it just seems like the norm. And because we live so much in online worlds now, the lines between what is virtual and what is real, the lines are so blurred that if you're living in this online community where these harmful ideas are completely normal, it just feels like this is just how the rest of society thinks. And it's going to get even harder to figure out what is true, what isn't, because of things like deepfakes. So none of these people are real. These are all examples of deepfakes, and you can make them instantly with certain websites. So in the future, even the importance of fact checking, and information hygiene is going to be so critical for us to actually tell like what is real anymore. But there are real good things about AI, because I know with technology ethics we often, we're like the fun police. We always mention all the horrible things. So this is stuff I got with DALL-E to do with my dog to get my dog to do funny things. And when you balance it out, it's kind of worth it. So this one, even with myself, I put an image into DALL-E to see what it would produce, and it came up with these clones of me. The last one made me look like the guy from Tinder Swindler. I don't really know how I feel about that, to be honest. But it is really bizarre, because even when I show people this and you put yourself into these tools, you get that weird hunch that I'm not sure, even though it's interesting, my gut feeling is that there could be some unintended consequences here if we're not careful. But it's so clear that AI and digital technology is so critical for the future of work and just our species generally, of how society is going. So even AI tools so important for sustainability, for actually energy expenditure, what can we do, the positive things we can do with AI. And even with physical robots, actually using them to help children with disabilities. There are absolutely amazing things you can do with technologies. But this only happens when you think about ethics from start to finish. Because ethics, this is something we talk about as being like the elephant in the room, right? Where you have a lot of ideas, we go, this could make me a lot of money in the short term, but my hunch is that there could be an unintended consequence. And often people just kind of ignore the hunch. They go, we'll just figure that out when the time comes. But now is the time for us as a society to actually not have it be an elephant in the room. I don't know what the opposite expression of elephant in the room is. I don't really know where you put the elephant, but it should be at like the forefront of everything we do. Final thing, right? Tilt versus Midjourney. So this was made, all these images Tilt used with Midjourney, an AI tool. My question is, if you had to buy artwork, would you pay more to buy something that was made by a human being or something that was made by an AI tool? So if you get a show of hands, who would actually go the extra mile, buy something that was actually made by a person without any involvement from AI? Okay, interesting. And who would say, even if it was AI generated, like if we frame it like this, okay, you got two pieces of artwork, one was made by AI, and you slightly like the AI one more. One was made by a human, which they took like 10 hours of like real detailed effort into it, but you like the AI one more. Would you still go with the person that made it or the AI tool?
I think people value like human connection. Like you look at, let's say, the I guess carpentry trade. It's very easy to kind of roll stuff out to mass produce and kind of create a table, but then or a chair. But then there's still value in the blood, sweat, and tears that are shed by a carpenter into the handmade. So I still think that despite the prolificness of things that could be created with AI, I think there's still going to be value placed on what we can create as artists. I think I don't discuss.
I think over time it will be the value of AI stuff will go down.
Yeah.
At the moment it's still novelty. People love it, but after a while I think people just get used to it.
I think there's a lot of value though in using human and AI and using AI as a tool. Certainly for me, I find that really inspiring. Suddenly you've got this whole new set of tools that we can use rather than going shit, AI's going to take my job. You know, it's actually it's really exciting time.
Because something I'm thoughtful of, even with ChatGPT and these tools, is that it's getting harder to see what was made by a human being or what was actually made by an algorithm. And my concern in the long term is that will this lead to like a more alienated society? Because even now, often people feel like the cogs in machines, right? Or like I can't see what I'm producing. Even like who made these jeans, these shoes? I don't know who made the stuff that I'm wearing. But in the future, when you don't even know, did a person make this? If you're speaking to someone online, is that actually a human being I'm speaking to? Or is that a chatbot? Or someone has a witty joke and you're like, did that comedian actually come up with that? Or did they just get an algorithm to automate it? And I think actually like being human and emotional intelligence is going to be one of the critical skills of the future. It's because people, I think, innately being human, we want human connection and that sort of thing. Like that sense of community. And even knowing that someone put their own sort of effort into making something for you. I think that that skill will be so important actually for our future. I think even in terms of creativity, no matter how much we do with AI, is that human component will still be there. And that's just my theory anyway. Maybe I'm completely wrong, but I still think that just knowing that things were made by people will be important.
I want to jump into something completely different. It's actually something that you mentioned in a previous conversation I've had with you, and that is a quote where you said, AI and the future of robotics could potentially, this is tapping into your kind of human rights side of things, but could potentially change, fundamentally change what it means to be human. And I'm talking here about sort of software, blurring the lines between software and human, sort of, you know, when you wear things. So for example, I was chatting to a friend today who is diabetic. He's got a little diabetic thing on his arm, and that then constantly monitors his blood sort of sugar levels and gives him that feedback. The next step of that is, does it have to be an external thing? You then augment yourself and it's plugged in, and then you're like, okay, this is really blurring the lines. If we extrapolate that further, you've got things like Neuralink. We had an interesting conversation around Neuralink and where that could go. Just interested on your thoughts on just around that and around the kind of the line you said, which was it's fundamentally changing what it means to be human.
Yeah, and I think because even Neuralink and the field is called like transhumanism, the idea of just instead of having like software and things external to yourself, is who's to stop you actually augmenting yourself. So with technologies like brain-computer interface, which Neuralink is, essentially looking at a chip in your brain that you can control your hormones with an app, what time you eat, what time you sleep. And there are amazing use cases for it, potentially being a cure for forms of paralysis. But the question you have to ask yourself is, if you can just control yourself with an app, at what point will you actually stop being human? So as human rights lawyers, we're well versed in like the Human Rights Act. So you've got a right to life, right to like freedom, family and friends. But if I can program myself to not want to actually spend time with family and friends ever again, or not even want to speak to people, have any human connection, and essentially turn myself into something that's not quite human, should I be able to do it? There's no laws that say I can't do it, but is that something as a society where we say, actually, should we be looking at guardrails now? And I think
Because there are no guardrails. It's just
Why is that different to the choice? What's the difference in the choice? So you could already do that, right? You could just go and use pharmaceuticals to completely change the way you physically look, and you could choose not to talk to anybody ever again, right? What's
it's
the
your
difference?
choice.
because philosophically,
It's not the AI changing you. You're making the decision to change the AI to reach your destination you've made.
the issue you find with technologies like brain-computer interfaces is that it's well and good if a few people, early adopters, like people use smart drugs and that sort of thing, right? But if you have it that it's so easily accessible and available, and people just in the workforce can outcompete others, even if I myself say I don't want to do this, the question is, will these people basically get left behind? Where you go, actually, this is just like no different from having a phone now. Those that wanted to sort of preserve this sense of like agency and being human, you have a choice, but in actuality, how real is it?
Are you creating more of a gap in I don't know.
It's the inequality in society you'll face, because there's even issues over, with the power of these technologies in particular, who gets access first. Is it just going to be the richest people in society that get early access? Is it going to be people from certain parts of the world, like Western Europe, North America? What about people in South America or, South Asia?
See, I think it's that equality. That's maybe to your point there. It's about, yes, we all have choice, but we're all starting from the same base. We have that choice to basically, withdraw ourselves from society. It doesn't matter if we've got loads of money or no money or wherever we start from. But I think what you're saying there is who gets access to that technology. Yeah. So it might start off quite altruistic in terms of, okay, we'll give this person this because it can benefit them. It can help reduce their kind of anxiety or mental health, and so it starts off as a medical sort of tool. But then once it hits the private sector, that's when it probably becomes a
because it goes from it always starts from medical use, then it goes to enhancement, which is where the real money is as well. To be honest, it's in the enhancement. How can you use this to make yourself better? And even with brain-computer interfaces, even like the new cybersecurity threats you're going to face, things like brain hacking are real concerns, because at the end of the day, it's still something that can be hacked. And even like new legislation being touted over like the right to free will or freedom from having your brain chip, your BCI being hacked. And it sounds very sci-fi-esque, but this stuff will be here before you know it.
Yeah.
We're in the society where you can't make a choice. So how are we really going to make a choice that we aren't going to let AI take over our lives, take over industries, endanger our jobs, or endanger whatever? How are we going to make a decision about not letting AI take over our lives? Because it's going to be pretty freaking easy to have it. Life is going to be easy if we do let it.
I think
So
it's
I'm very suspicious.
It's the quote, isn't it? We give up our freedoms gradually and then all at once.
Yeah.
It's a bit, don't know.
Yeah, honestly, it's a really hard question, because it's a very existential hot potato question you gave me. Because at the end of the day, because we all want to ask these questions, say it's clear that we want to get the best out of these tools, but one of the biggest issues I think is that even with just ethics, it's sort of been siloed into this weird niche field when it shouldn't be. Like if we look in this room, like how many people here studied maths or chemistry at some point in your lives at school? Who here studied ethics? And you wonder why we're so bad at making these decisions. It's because we never I mean, your priorities are there. We all studied STEM. You had to do it. Most people, closest you got to ethics might have been GCSE English at most.
Yeah.
You think it needs to become part of the curriculum?
I think so. I think
Okay.
even lawyers should have to do a module on AI ethics. I think that ethics should be part of every curriculum to understand that if we're living in a society where you have automated tools making decisions about you, you need to know how and why they're making these decisions. There's no point having legislation saying you have right to redress and contest it if you don't even know that AI was being used in the first place.
It did sound like during your talk intentionality was quite important, but some of the major use cases were academics solving a specific problem. And some of the most dangerous situations were where social media is available to anyone, and that creates an echo chamber. So do you think that kind of managing technology for specific as a tool rather than just generally used could be part of the solution?
Yeah, I think even when you're looking at intention in design, something that I think actually the creators in the room will be happy to hear this is that you have like a unique ability to have foresight. Because when we look at unintended consequences of how will social media play out in academia versus in the real world, often people just they haven't studied ethics, they don't know it, but they can't see in their head how will the consequences lead to something spiraling. And that's where you need, like, good designers, I found, are really good at forecasting and just vision painting. So who here has seen like TV shows like Black Mirror?
Mm-hmm.
That's the best digital ethics training you can do, because that is saying if you don't think about ethics, this is going to happen, and that is the worst case scenario. And if you look at that and you go, okay, I don't really want to get shot in the head by a robot dog. Walking backwards, what steps do we need to do to not get there? And that's why I always push like science fiction as being great learning, to actually see that this is what happens when we don't do ethics. Let's try not go down Blade Runner, and let's try to do something else.
Well, look, let's take it back and make it a little bit lighter. Just taking your Blade Runner quote there. Choose one likely future, in your opinion. The Terminator, AI decides to wipe out humanity. Blade Runner, the line between what's human and what's synthetic becomes blurred. Or Wall-E, we all become wasteful blobs that leave behind a broken planet. Which
Wall-E.
word? Definitely Wall-E. Okay.
Because honestly, I think the thing with AI, why we all love it so much as well, it just makes life so easy. But if you got a tool that can automate things for you and just does everything for you, we're, like human beings, we're inherently quite lazy as well. Like we want to find the fastest way of doing something. But the issue is that when life becomes so easy, you just kind of lose all your skills. Like who here can like navigate themselves without using Google Maps anymore, or still
Does it by automation anyway? You know where you're going,
Yeah.
you stick it on anyway.
yeah.
Yeah.
Or even who, like spell check, right? My spelling's horrible now because I just use spell check all the time. I can't do mental maths anymore. I've lost that skill because I just got my phone to do it for me. And I actually spoke to a researcher, a public speaker recently, where she noted a link between those that use lots of sat-nav, GPS and everything, and actually neurological illnesses, things like Alzheimer's, saying because you actually need to exercise your mind so much with these mental problems that the more you make things easy, you sort of just lose, you just unskill, you degenerate. And that's why we often think of good outcomes, particularly in the West, I'd say as well, as like things that make life easy, that automate things. But culturally, different parts of the world were like easy doesn't necessarily mean good, because they recognize that these skills, these hard skills, you need to retain them. Because again, that's part of just your virtues, like virtue ethics, like being a good person, being competent. You can't always rely on technology to do these things for you.
So there was something around, you just said in there about sort of pace and speed of change. So I mean, the old Facebook motto, or was it Facebook? I can't remember. It was it move fast and break things? Well, Steve Jobs maybe. Does folks? So this is something that myself and Paul, I think we had a really interesting internal chat on Tilt Slack channel last week about this. But does focusing on ethics get in the way of innovation?
I'm financially incentivized to say no, aren't I? Well, the truth is, I'd argue that ethics, it actually just builds more inclusive and better products and services. So who remembers when Alexa first came out? So when Alexa first came out, it was a great visionary tool that Amazon had designed, But if you had a Scottish accent, it wouldn't even work. So like, what was the point of that? Then they had to go back to the drawing board because they didn't think of the ethics. Then people are saying data privacy, where's your privacy policy for this? If you go back to the beginning, and if they thought about bias from the start, you just build a more inclusive, better product and service. So if you do it right, you don't have to do it twice. And if you just take even 20 minutes or half an hour at the start of doing something to think through, okay, privacy issues, bias, like social acceptance, impact on people's just even mental health, you'll find that actually you just build something better by doing ethical design. Like, there's a lot of economic pressure, right? You want to, everyone else is releasing things, put things out there. But I'd argue, even as a commercially driven person, that if people are going to move fast and break, let them break first, we'll move second, and we'll just move better. Like, you don't always have to release things really quickly. Release it when it's good.
I think you see Google Bard advert. Do you ever see that?
Yeah.
That's for those who didn't see it. Google Bard basically released, trying to keep up with Microsoft and OpenAI. They released their Google Bard, which is their version of their AI interface, and I think they created an advert where it was being asked a question and giving a response. And in the advert that they pushed out, it gave the incorrect response. So firstly, the person who signed off that advert, good luck keeping your job. But yeah, it's things like that. You should slow it down, and check things through.
The philosophy is
Move fast.
move fast, right?
Yeah.
To get out an MVP,
Yeah.
to allow the users to perfect the experience rather than designers to perfect the experience.
But it's that word users, so maybe we need to add that ethical layer, that consideration layer in to what is what is an MVP, and make sure we consider that, and that just becomes part of the process. And then the users are deciding what works, what doesn't, but it's all users rather than only the ones that it's actually working for.
I think you're absolutely right, because like, even the terms like, human-centered design, everyone's talking human-centered design. Like, I was laughing with you earlier saying that, like, if we weren't designing for humans, who have we been designing for the last 30 years? But how is this just now becoming a thing of just thinking, who is your customer? And with Agile, I think I agree that there are issues where people just think, we need to get things through the next sprint, get things done as quickly as possible. But again, you need to have like the end point of the product in mind. That even when you go through these sprint cycles, it has to deliver something good at the end of it. And if you're rushing things and it's not going to meet the mark, you didn't meet the thresholds that you set for yourself at the beginning. So even when you're setting your sprints and everything, it should be, with the ethics should still be included throughout the whole design.
So, just on that, what's your one piece of advice to someone building a digital product when it comes to considering digital ethics?
Just one piece of
One
advice.
piece. What's your golden nugget? And then I'll open the floor again. I'm talking a lot, so sorry.
I'd say the biggest failures you often find, especially with AI, are usually going to be privacy or bias related. So privacy is because we have GDPR and stuff, it's a little bit more understood. But then you have issues like even the perception of surveillance. Even if it's not collecting personal data, if you have a sensor on the wall here, there might be a feeling of like unease. And the bias is the big one, I'd say, especially with AI. Even if you just start considering algorithmic bias or who's actually working for, are some people benefiting more than others? Even just considering bias, you limit the amount of failures you're going to have.
On a global culture scale, do you think AI is going to lead to sort of like the flattening of cultures, so like there'll be less differences but also maybe more inequality at the same time?
Yeah. I mean, culture and AI ethics is something I'm particularly passionate about, because even lots of the discussions around AI ethics are usually occurring in like new AI ethics principles coming out of like North America, Western Europe. But what you find is that large parts of the world, they should also be part of this conversation. So how should AI work for you? So if you look, like, I'm a Muslim, right? For us, like, automating things, making life easy, that's not necessarily a good thing for even how our societies are set up, because a lot of it is based on like your virtue and character. So if you look at something we're taught from an early age, is like look after your grandparents and elderly. In a society where you can just say, give them a robot that automates all this stuff for you, you don't have to speak to them anymore. For us, that's not necessarily like a good thing. And it's important for us, even for AI just to work across the world, it's so nuanced depending on your culture and your society, like the country where you live, to think, will this actually work the same way? So yeah, I mean, I was actually reading about like even Aboriginal, I'm probably going to get this wrong, but it was some, what was it? It was I think it was with Aboriginal Australians, where it could be, and this could be completely wrong, like this could be misinformation I'm spreading, but it was something to do with it being perceived as sort of like an insult if you took a gift from someone in your relative, like I think it was your father-in-law or something. And they used an example, if you had a smart fridge, they just automated the delivery of like groceries to your house from that individual, that would be perceived as like an insult. I probably got this example completely wrong because I read it this morning. But even just thinking about that, it's something that even myself in technology ethics, I never really thought of. Like, how would people from Aboriginal Australians actually think about how their data should be used? This is the thing with ethics, right? Is that there's like literally so much you can consider. Sometimes it feels like it'll just never end. And the truth is, you can only do as much, you can only do your best. And if you design like an inclusive product or service where you actually looked at people's psychological health, physical health, making sure they're not getting injured, on the whole, from where we are in society now, I'd say that you're actually doing a pretty good job. So even when we're doing technology ethics, we don't expect people to sit down for like a year before every product and think every single thing that could go wrong. Really, you're saying what are the biggest risks that you're going to face, which is why I often talk about privacy related things or bias related things, because that's where most of the bad things happen. And if you can plug those holes, the rest should be okay. You should avoid most unintended consequences, and you should be building, hopefully, more inclusive products and services.
Do you have any time for the idea that at a certain level of intelligence, consciousness spontaneously appears? And if so, do we have an ethical duty to AI entities themselves?
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing, right? Like artificial general intelligence.
Yeah, we're going.
And this is where like I have my own bias, right? Because like as a Muslim, we believe that we have souls, and we don't think that algorithms have souls. So let's say I had you, John, and I had like a robot version of you, with an algorithm that I put all your memories into it, and it looks exactly like you, it speaks just like you. To me, that's not you, because what makes you you is your soul, and that machine will never have that. It might simulate it, but it's a simulated intelligence. It's a simulation of what you are. But if you don't share that worldview, arguably you can say, what is the distinction? Because as long as you have memories and you have simulation of intelligence, what is the distinction between biological me and a copy version of me?
Yeah, interesting one. Well, I was listening to a podcast on the way here, it's around a similar thing, and what's interesting is they were talking about, obviously historical kind of AI was based on sort of decision tree stuff, so you could basically follow a process down and you can kind of get to where a kind of an AI would come out with a solution. It's explainable how it arrived at that decision. With modern neural networks, etc., they know how it was built and they know what the expected answer is, but they don't know how it works in the middle.
It's the black box problem.
The black box problem, yeah. So is it like, because of that unknown, are we then basically, is it the unknown that kind of creates, we're getting into really deep stuff here, that kind of creates a soul, as it were, or who decides that? And it's
because it's the unknown is where you get like a lot of mysticism around AI. When you have a piece of software that can predict amazing things, and statistically it's so complex, the people that designed it don't actually know how it's come up with the output, how it's making the predictions. And that's when you look at it and you're like, this thing's magic. I've just invented some magic machine that tells me. But then when you look at deep inside of it, at the end of the day, it's not magic. It's still mathematics.
Yeah. That
really, when you decipher it, it's still going down. It's still making predictions based on data
that we put into it.
But then arguably, for someone that wasn't religious, they would say that we're just prediction machines based on data.
Yeah.
And we're just biological processes and hormones that make predictions.
I'm struggling to keep up with this. Anyone going to help me out?
This is a lot harder. This is a lot harder than I thought it was going to be.
Let's talk about robot dogs. We haven't talked about that much.
Yeah, we should.
We should. It's right there. I read somewhere there was, I don't know where it was, but there was something that happened somewhere remote where they had like a kind of a robot. They actually had like a, was it a Boston Dynamics robot dog or something? And there's some emotional connection that was created between the people there and this dog, and they actually put their own lives at risk or something.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, we often find like physical robots, like especially in the military, that people have funerals for their bomb disposal robots, real psychological issues when they break down, particularly in stressful environments. Because the thing about robots is so unique, especially like physical things, especially when they move, is that when you're around them, it does feel like they're animals, kind of like pets. So when you have your robot dog moving around, because your brain, we're not used to seeing just physical robots moving around us. You kind of, again, like classification, you go back to just the label of it's just dog. Like something inside your brain goes, this is just like my pet. And if you spend a lot of time with it, it's only natural that you sort of anthropomorphize. And this is when you treat basically an object like a living thing. And you start to project that it's feeling, I'm going to take my robot dog for a walk, or he's feeling sad, he or she giving it a name. And then it leads to like unhealthy attachment issues. And one of the issues we're going to face actually in society is that, like I think it's clear we're living in like a loneliness epidemic, especially post-COVID. There have been reports of people treating like Alexa like their actual friend or someone they can confide in, all that sort of stuff. I see a lot of people nodding like, yeah, I do that all the time. But it's going to be interesting because when you have physical robots that are there, like these could be considered companions. But if I'm like a robot supplier and I know I'm going to make a robot dog that targets specific people that are vulnerable to loneliness or whatever, and then I give it to them for free, then they're attached to their robot dog, then I go, from now on, that's £2,000 a month.
Would you give it up?
I mean,
yeah.
If you're looking at your actual real pets, people would spend a lot of money just to keep spending time with them. And that's when you think about just the future of just well-being in people.
I think it's true though. It's like with Boston Dynamics, there was a video where they were like kicking the shit out of it to try and knock it over.
Yeah.
It's just like a moving robot, and you're just like, what? You can't do that.
It just makes you uncomfortable because there's even in the military where they had some bomb disposal robots, where there's a story where someone just said it was inhumane what they were doing to it because they're blowing off each of its legs, and he just said, I can't just watch this anymore. Because they just look like animals, and you don't really make that disconnection between like, it's just a piece of technology and this is like a living thing. But one of the ethical dilemmas that we haven't really figured out yet is that, should we be encouraging people just to view it as technology? Because if you have like a child that grows up knowing that it's okay to kick my robot dog and just abuse it, will that child then think I can abuse people, I can abuse real pets? And even now with kids growing up with Alexa, just swearing at Alexa, yelling at Alexa.
What are we teaching them with that? It's like,
I think it was Charlie Brooker, the creator of Black Mirror, said you're training your cruelty muscles. Basically, if you're not careful with this. I think this is the thing, is that it's so new. Like, as a society, as a species, we just haven't done this before. We've predicted it in like science fiction and stuff how it would go. I know we often went down the Terminator route saying this is how it ends up, but just being attached to your robot dog or treating it the same like an actual pet dog is something that we don't really see as much of. And to be honest, I don't really know how it's going to impact us. I don't think anyone really knows at this stage.
On that sort of emotional kind of connection side of things. So I'm reminded of that film, Her. Have you seen that?
Yeah, Her. That's a great movie.
Falls in love with the operating system.
Yeah.
You can see how that happens to a degree. Okay, anyone else got any other questions? We've got about 5 minutes left. Ivor, Bernie.
You mentioned GDPR, and obviously before that existed, there was no legislation about privacy on the internet. Is legislation the next step for AI, and how do we then do that right?
You're a smart man, because the EU are thinking exactly along the right lines. So later this year, they're releasing the latest draft of the EU Artificial Intelligence Act.
Are they?
Which is basically the extension of GDPR. So they're looking at what they call like high-risk AI systems. So like AI that predicts whether you get a job or not, whether you get a mortgage or not, whether like this building's safe or unsafe, like safety of critical infrastructure, So the regulators understand that you need guardrails around these things, and ethics is like a huge component of it. So when you look at hiring bias and that sort of thing, instead of it being like the Wild West, where
You've got a framework to work
you
within.
got, yeah, exactly. Like you have to submit conformity assessments, there's assurance around it. And the idea is that certain things like social scoring systems, like if you live in a society where an algorithm rates you, all of us based on our perceived trustworthiness and who we can speak with, who we can network with, whether we're actually allowed to work for this company or not, where they're saying these basically threaten fundamental human rights and we shouldn't actually be going down this route.
No, 100%.
I mean,
You're going
yeah.
down a Black Mirror episode.
Yeah,
basically.
it's literally an attempt to say, let's not go down the Black Mirror route.
Okay. When's that coming out?
This will be released later this year.
Okay.
Actual being mandated will be in expected 2025. So that's when the fines start hitting. It's actually, it's clear from the draft of the legislation, the first one, they were actively looking at basically the big tech companies, these who they were targeting. So yeah, they will be directly impacted by this. Like all these, and that is really the purpose of the legislation, is to say we have to actually start thinking about ethics and well-being, and creators of AI systems, so the big tech companies, will have to basically explain how did you think about ethics when it comes to like harms, whether it's like harm people physically or psychologically, and what steps did you take to remove them. So even if you look at Facebook, right, even with things like the like button, it was just a simple design trick, right? Like design technique. You just click the like button, it shows social proofing, which ideas are the best or not. Then a really subtle unintended consequence was that loads of people didn't get likes. And then all of a sudden your social status goes down and you might end up feeling anxious and that sort of thing. But what they're looking for is to say that even with the like button, a simple trick would have just been just hide the amount of likes each post gets until you actually click on it. And little things like that is what they're looking for, to say that you did stuff to just stop harms from occurring.
How about like copyright and like protecting artists and things like that, you know, with image rights? Will that be part of that, or?
Yeah, copyright's an interesting one, because even we already have like existing copyright legislation. So even with ChatGPT and DALL-E and these AI tools, this is something that they're actively looking at, because it's kind of twofold. It could be I use one of these automated tools and I produce something, right, like my new movie poster, that an artist says, I literally made that and that looks exactly like mine. I think the algorithm basically just ripped off my stuff and gave it to you. And I don't know from the AI provider, did they use that from the training set? Did they just copy and paste? I don't know. Then there's the issue of like, let's produce something using one of these tools and it's this amazing movie poster. And I say, I don't want anyone to use it because it's mine. Does that belong to me or does that belong to the AI provider? Do I have any ownership of it? And this is something legally we're actually like in the process of figuring out, because there are multiple cases to basically figure out what is the IP infringement issue here.
Is that like the NFT thing?
Yeah, so
like
options.
the about options of ownership, and is that what you're talking?
It was more to do like just if we have like an AI tool, right? Like DALL-E or ChatGPT. Like let's say ChatGPT gives me like an amazing movie idea, and then an artist online says your movie idea is exactly the same as the one ChatGPT said. I think ChatGPT had my movie stuff in its training data and it just recycled it to you. So I feel like you've ripped me off. And it's to say, because I don't know what the AI provider, whether they use that or not. It might have just been a coincidence. Then it's to say, even the output of this movie idea, do I own this or not?
Yeah, that's what's confusing to me, is because you know, you have the information has to be inputted into, you know, the whatever, into the bucket, so something can come out of it. You know, isn't that true? I mean, they get all their information by everything that we all create.
Yeah.
You know, so in a way, the AI is ripping us all off. So
that is actually one way of looking at it, is to say that even though we say
From day one.
it's actually like a serious ethical dilemma, because we talk about how amazing ChatGPT is and everything, but the truth is, right, is that like if a person told you these things, you'd be like, yeah, mate, yeah, thank you, yeah. But when an algorithm sort of automates it for you, for whatever reason, we're more like, this is really cool, this is breathtaking stuff. But at the end of the day, it's just recycling our own stuff and feeding it back to us. And one of the issues, I think, because we live in like such a fast-paced world now, where if an AI tool can give you 4 to 5 bullet points to make you sound really intelligent, for us, That's all we need.
Yeah. You need about an hour's worth of chat, and then God, run out of things.
Yeah,
to say.
yeah.
It's also things like you could fire open things like Midjourney, and you could upload an image of, say, Banksy, for example, and then you could say, now give me, imagine a Tristan over there in the style of Banksy. Does that belong to Banksy?
Right.
Is that because it's directly come from an original source image, or where does that line stop? And also, if you're
Yeah, and the ironic thing is that Banksy actually has his the way he makes his stuff is so easy that anybody can make
Yeah.
it, that it's plagiarizable.
Yeah.
Plagiarizable. Anybody can.
Yeah.
Like songs over the years, though, that's famous that loads of songs have 4 chords, and
Yeah.
the ones that will get sued would be 0.1%.
I know.
It will probably end up that with imagery.
Yeah.
There'll be a few lawsuits because it's so close, but
It's very
people like it
difficult,
and everything's
yeah.
passable.
I think it has to be with music. Like music is copyrightable by the melody and the words. You can't copyright 4 chords. You can't copyright a feel. So can you copyright a style? I can copyright my image that I've made, but am I going to be able to do that with it's pink and blue? Like, no, you can't copyright colours. The same way you can't copyright C, F, and G. Like it's that's the point about where the line is drawn about what is your intellectual property and what your copyright is.
Yeah. With emerging like new AI tools, they will have referencing in there to say this was the source of how it gave this prediction, and there will be watermarking, like a little logo to say that, hey, this was made by future ChatGPT or whatever it is, and you can't remove it. So if you copy and paste it, say that even though no ownership, this was made by an algorithm, you can't claim ownership of it. But you made a really brilliant point actually about like copywriting styles. That's something I've not really thought of actually, is that in the future, like my prediction is that the way we look at music and just work is going to change, because it won't be that you're just the sole creator. It'll be almost like you're a composer of different algorithms that sort of automate music and art and these things for you. But I'm just thinking, like, if you were known for a style of sort of using AI tools, or you had your unique sort of recipe for doing this sort of stuff, could you sort of copyright that, or could you have ownership over like how you use AI?
It will get to the point where we're worried about how it's going to rip off an artist, whereas actually it's how did the AI even get that information, and is that allowed? I've stuck stuff into Midjourney or Stable Diffusion. I've got the Getty logo back out. You can tell it's the Getty logo. So that's where you got your stuff, which you're not allowed to. That's not your image.
And even with the AI Act, that's actually something regulators are calling for, is like auditability of your training data. So even when you're getting all these sources together, you basically got to document and say, this is where I pulled all this information from. And even when you're looking at things like bias, to show that, hey, we actually had like a diverse set of training data to have this tool. We didn't just look from one part of the world with one source text. We actually, this was what we used to train it. So we won't have that sort of dilemma, or hopefully we won't have as much as dilemma to say like, what was in this data soup, where randomly you get like an Activision logo or whatever it is that just spits out.
That'll be a commodity. If I can then verify this data source is B Corp, C Corp, AI Corp verified, so therefore I know that it's all okay.
Certification.
Will I then pay £20 a month to access service rather than download some dodgy model off a torrent?
And that's exactly what the EU is trying to do with like basically certification. Say that this has been CE approved, like you can basically, it's trustworthy, right? Like you're not going to get the company, like even a commercial business, you want to ideally partner with people that they complied with the law, data privacy, copyright. You're not going to have 2 years down the line a load of issues that getting sued all over the place. You're exactly like hitting the nail on the head, really.
I think it's going to be a while off though to kind of get that actually implemented and rolled out, and sort of people actually sort of embracing it. I mean, even now.
I was going to say, do you think artists will get paid? I mean, is it going to be the big companies? Disney will get paid. Someone who's uploaded their stuff to our station, will they ever get paid? Because I'm sure there's some artists who their work has been propagated all around the place.
I mean, they should get paid, but the issue is it's just so hard to even tell how is their data even being used. So unless you have that sort of assurance in place, or that becomes normal, to at least have auditability over like which artist data do you use and were they informed, did they give informed consent? Yeah, because there's like different types of explainability even with AI. This is more general, with things like counterfactual fairness and causal inference, where it's basically like undoing the black box to say if you can trace it back, how did it actually make its decisions on which data points? But again, for things like copyright as well, is that you kind of need to be open about what data you used in the first place. So for the artist, I mean, if you're a provider of an AI tool that's sort of automating images and stuff, when that deciphering process takes place, you kind of need to be transparent about what data you actually used. Otherwise, it just still takes you back to zero, if that makes sense.
Mm. One of the things that I only discovered, I think you shared this little nugget last week actually, was around, again, sort of along the copyright sort of thread. You know, we do a lot of work with voiceover artists or presenters coming in and sort of on a film shoot, for example. Now, interestingly, you would hire someone in, for example, and they'd be on a film shoot. You then have their voice. Right now, you could take that voice, you could train an AI model on that voice. You've then got their voice. You could then do what you like with it. There's no law right now or anything that says you can't. You know, it feels like we need to something. I mean, who should be, you know, governing this? Is it the governments putting this in place, or is it businesses, or is it individuals? Like, how do we capture this?
Yeah, because even with like the use of voice, right? So arguably you could say things like using my voice and repurposing is still technically like a form of biometric data. So you can make claims around GDPR, like, but even then, like as reading, because we often like look at biometrics, things for like security, but an article came out in The Guardian where people are just basically using deepfake audio to fool like tax authorities and that sort of thing. And there's actually like a legal argument to say, like, in terms of admissible court evidence, in the future, will voice, was usually primary evidence, will this just be hearsay?
Yeah.
Because it's just so easy to make a deep fake. Like if anyone can make a deep fake with a few buttons online, what is audio evidence anymore?
You mentioned her as the most likely scenario in the film Her. People falling in love with the software. Don't you think that if you wind it forwards even further than just the immediate future that we're talking about, in terms of artists and music and things like that, eventually it'll get past that and it'll just be, this AI will know you so well and it will just feed you real-time generated music and artwork that comes from nowhere, that there's no more need for artists.
Why do you have to ask that right at the end? Like, right, the hardest. You save that like right at the end.
That should be the starting question.
Yeah, that should be the starting one. Yeah, because even with like personalized AI, it is a weird one because I think that this could be a scenario where you have like personalized digital assistants telling you what you want to hear, what you need to hear within each second. But then it kind of takes a lot of life out of life. Because part of what makes life good is that you have the bad times and you have the good times, and you don't sort of appreciate the sun without the rain, right? And if all you have is sun all the time, I think you'll actually just end up getting depressed, because even you lose like the sort of randomness of life of just finding an artist online on Spotify when you're on shuffle or something. You're like, actually, that was really good. And you lose that sort of excitement when you're just so used to just having what you want all the time. And again, if you have like a digital assistant, like from the movie Her, that just gives you what you want all the time, what need do you have for just other people anymore?
That also just becomes normal. And so that then becomes your baseline.
The baseline.
Yeah. And so where do you go from there? You have to keep surging forwards, which is not a pleasant thought.
And then you have like the real addiction issue, right? If that's your baseline, as soon as you unplug from the matrix and you're back in like the normal world.
Eating gruel, whatever it
is.
Yeah,
gruel, yeah. I mean, it's going to be pretty hard to adapt.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, thank you very much. I think, you summed it up there, the end, which I can't read my writing. You can't have something without the sun and the rain. What was that?
Can't have sun. Can't appreciate sun without the rain.
That's the one. You can't appreciate the sun without the rain. That will teach me to learn to write better. It's a beautiful sentiment to end on. So, Uthman, thank you very much for coming today. And thank you everyone for coming. So it's all good.